Well, we're back from exec session and we're ready to go with our public portion. And Maura, we're going to start with the pledge.
Yes.
There we go. Oh. And Brad, if you could help me out.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. As mentioned, we are back. We were in open session. We went to exec, and now we're back in our open session. And this is where we follow whatever Moira's phone tells us.
Just told me that it's Tuesday, October 24th.
If it's
I don't know
Tuesday,
why
October,
it told me that.
if it's Tuesday, October 24th, that means we have a Board of Education meeting, and we're in public session, and we have a few items to go through. We've been, the agenda is in front of us, in front of me. And did we modify the agenda? There were other items floating around. Is anything? Looking at administrators in the room?
Everything's there.
Just nothing. You just have nothing for us. Okay. All right. We'll see when we get there. So if no modifications to the agenda, we'll move on to public comment period, which is always the first thing we get to, so we can hear from folks from the community. And we have a few folks signed up.
Yes, the first person signed up is Vera McCafferty, and a polite reminder that we try to keep a public comment to 3 minutes. Doesn't mean that we couldn't engage after that, but just in case I let folks know. So, I hope I pronounced that name correctly? Yeah, she said.
You can stand, you can sit, you can...
Hello, my name is Vera, and I'm here just because there's an agenda item that affects my youngest daughter who is interested in playing modified basketball. And so I don't know if I have as much of a comment as a question. She's my third child who's been either through the system or involved now, and I guess my question is whether we will be allowed to play modified basketball this season. She was going to come, but she's on the modified soccer bus right now, having a great time. And I guess my question, because we've been here a couple times before for either it was a different AD or a different sport, and my question is about if there is a blanket rule that exists for the Montessori school, if it's just cut sports, if it has to be merged for each time, is it a subjective thing based on the coach or the AD at the time? And if so, would you consider as a board considering to come up with something that is a little bit more inclusive for the kids so that it doesn't continue to come up for a specific season or a specific sport? So I guess that's a multiple question here. Thank you.
Which we can respond to just in a bit when we do board responses after we go hear from the kids, and we'll be right back. And someone will have answers that we can provide for all that. Thanks, Vera.
Up next is Suzanne or Susan, and
I'm Suzanne Schumann. I'm here to support Vera. My daughter as well would like to try out for modified basketball. I myself was an athlete at the high school and actually played modified sports, and I'm really hoping for the same for her and that there won't be any problems with that. So she's also on the soccer bus. She wanted to be here today, but unfortunately can't be here. So.
No, very good. We'll speak to it in a bit.
Excellent. Up next is Polly Wood.
Okay. So I put together 3 minutes of thoughts, but I wanted to tell you that this is my first time at a Board of Education meeting. It's really new for me. And just in case it doesn't come off as if I'm asking for help, I'm actually asking for help. So I came to try to represent the voice of many people that I've spoken with that are in distress over the past couple months. And it has to do with religious freedom in the school district and kind of the discerning process of who is afforded religious freedom and who's not. And so I'm just going to share my thoughts and try to fit it all in. My name is Polly. My daughter is a 4th generation student of Ithaca City School District. Her education is currently not in jeopardy, but the education of many others around her are. I've been reading the policy books, and I saw that policy, ICSD policy number 1230 states that, quote, religious or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Policy number 4314 says that the ICSD district will remain impartial with regard to religion. And, quote, the students, faculty, and administration are reminded of pluralism of religious beliefs, specifically that which is important and meaningful to some may be offensive to others. Each person's reminded to be conscious of and respect the sensitivities of others. And, quote, efforts should be made to avoid having students be asked to explain their religious beliefs, customs, or traditions. So, in the past 2 months, I've witnessed many families in distress and my own feeling of threat of religious persecution. ICSD has been employing coercive, in my opinion, coercive and intimidating techniques that are suppressing the voices of parents and families whose deeply held religious beliefs are upsetting the economics of the district. ICSD has been sending out intimidating letters demanding that parents with a few days' notice submit an explanation of their deeply held religious beliefs, how they came to these beliefs, when they came to these beliefs, and how their beliefs inform their choice to choose or not choose to vaccinate their children. The letters say that the sincerity of their deeply held beliefs are in question. They'll be judged by a few school principals, and their children's future, the future of their child's education relies on their ability to convince these 3 or 4 principals the depth of their sincerity of their religious beliefs. And I just have a lot of questions, such as like, how can one person claim to have the ability to judge another person's religious sincerity? What qualifies anybody to sit in judgment of another person's deeply held religious beliefs? What techniques are being employed to measure the degree of another person's own relationship to their understanding of the divine? I'm wondering if any of you have ever been cast aside in your life at any point for your religious beliefs. Did anybody ever get made fun of when they were a kid for their religion or their choice of divination? I'm wondering if you've experienced what it's like to have someone tell you that you need to explain your most sacred relationship to your heart and demand that you explain what's precious and valued to you and your ideas about working with a higher power, whether you call it God or the gods or a goddess or the higher being or the earth or the sky, whatever you want to call it, and wondering if you know what it feels like when someone says that they're going to judge you based on your sincerity, and then they're going to either accept or deny you in that sincerity, and that the future of your child's education lies in their judgment. So I guess what it boils down to is that I feel like the process has been very divisive, and there's no transparency, and there's a lot of concerned parents, and I'm wondering where we can go from here, and I don't know where to go, and also if it's about sincerity, like what, is the district and the administration sincere in their beliefs and policies about everybody having religious freedom?
Up next is Devon Buckley.
Hi. My name is Devon Buckley, and I have 3 children in town, one of which just graduated from IHS last year, and another whose education has been denied as of Friday, and another who is in kindergarten at the Ithaca Waldorf School. I have handouts here if anybody's interested. I have a speech from Barack Obama about religious freedom, and I also have the tenets of my religion, which is spiritual science, and it's right here. So I think people don't really understand what my religion is, and that could possibly be why I've been judged the way I've been judged. But I wrote a speech so I can be clear with you today. So yeah, I'm also an early childhood educator, and I've been working in Ithaca for 14 years doing that work. I'm a licensed home daycare provider, and I came here to let you know that we are spiritual scientists in my home, and the tenets of our religion are included here. I actually used meditation and prayer when I decided, or when I was facing the decision on whether or not to continue my son Thane going to the Waldorf school or to come to Boynton. And I came to the decision that Boynton was the best choice for him at this time. Sorry. He's doing really well. He had all A's and B's on his first report. And anyway, so in my interpretation of my religion, which has the room for the acceptance of all faiths, there are several reasons that I cannot agree with our country's current vaccine schedule and the science behind it, but mostly because it taints what I believe is our pure bodies and our pure blood, which is the home for our spirits and our souls that are only incarnating as young children. And I wrote this in my original statement to the Boynton school nurse, and I embellished it as I was supposed to in my second letter of declaration. And I did not ask for a tribunal at that time because I felt very strongly about my beliefs, and I didn't think that anyone could question them. But then I received a letter denying my son an education, and I haven't been able to speak in front of anybody. And I now have to appeal to the Commissioner of Education, as you wrote in your letter to me, which means I have to go through a court hearing process in Albany in order for my son to go to school here in Ithaca. Obviously, I'm very upset about this. So, and I believe that what has currently set me apart from those families who have unvaccinated children and beliefs that encourage them to walk that path is the fact that I did not speak with a lawyer before I wrote my letter. So I didn't feel like a lawyer could help anybody understand my religious beliefs. I don't think I could help a lawyer understand my religious beliefs, but apparently that's what I need in order for my child to be educated in Ithaca. And yet it's my right as an American to religious freedom and to public education for my children. I would like to read a little bit from Obama's speech from January 2016 about religious freedom. Since our country's founding, religious freedom has been heralded as one of our most cherished ideals. The right to practice religion freely has brought immigrants from all over the world to our shores, often in the face of great adversity, so they could live their lives in accordance with the dictates of their consciences. And in the end, he states, "Let us recommit ourselves to protecting religious minorities here at home and around the world. May we remember those who have been persecuted, tortured, or murdered for their faith, and reject any politics that targets people because of their religion, including any suggestion that our laws, policies, or practices should single out certain faiths for disfavored treatment. And as one nation, let us state clearly and without equivocation that an attack on any faith is an attack on every faith, and come together to promote religious freedom for all." So this, beyond my letter, I was also subject to a phone call. In that phone call, I was not asked one question about my religion. One of the questions that came up was, "What kind of supplements do your children take to stay healthy?" So I answered, "None, we don't. I still believe that nature is the most powerful force, and if you work with it, then you can find healing." That's my belief. Yet that didn't prove anything to these people, apparently. So Devon Buckley Camacho is my son. He should be in 6th grade, hopefully at Boynton. I have no idea what's going to happen for him at this point. And he's one fine young man. He's 5'4". He was the fastest long distance runner in the Ithaca Youth Bureau cross country team this year. And he prayed to our Creator around an altar that he constructed himself just Sunday night, not knowing what's going to happen to his life. And we prayed together, and he proudly wore his bracelet that said, "Boynton is kind." But in his confusion this weekend, he was tugging at it and tugging at it and tugging at it till it broke. And I am basically asking for a chance to sit in front of a tribunal, as I believe every other family had the chance to do, so I can avoid the need to participate in court hearings in Albany. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. That is everyone that has signed up. Anyone else wish to speak at this time? This is the time to do it. If not, we'll move on and there will be opportunities to respond. Not seeing anyone else that wishes to speak. So, student reps.
Yeah.
Ithaca High, you get to follow public comment.
All right, thank you. So the IHS reps recently have secured a news column on the IHS Tatler. And for those of you who didn't know, the IHS Tatler is our school's newspaper, our news source. And on the monthly column, we plan to, we've already written one for the November issue, but we plan to sort of update the students on what the important stuff that they might want to know that have been going on in the board meetings, such as the discussion about water quality that happened around a month ago. And yeah.
So for sports, a new club has been created called Captain's Council, and it was created by the athletic director to help expand the role of captains on varsity sports teams and provide more leadership opportunities for them to expand.
Okay, so last week was the October Student Council meeting. So basically during the meeting, people were split into subcommittees, which are schoolworks, fundraising, and public relations. So fundraising is just tasked with setting up fundraisers such as bake sales and the fundraisers at Chipotle and other places where you can go and some of what you pay is contributed to student council. And then public relations is going to be doing staff teacher spotlights, and they'll be sending teachers little notes such as Ithaca's high school student council appreciates whichever teacher, and this is just a way to make sure that all teachers know that they're appreciated for all their hard work.
So the third main subcommittee in student council is called the schoolwork subcommittee, and it's responsible for tackling issues around the school that students bring up. They report them to their social studies representative, who then goes to these meetings and talks about these issues and how to solve them with other representatives. So some issues that were discussed was an idea to purchase a new microwave in the cafeteria. And the point of the fundraisers that Mirabai talked about was to raise money so that we're able to fund certain projects like buying new things for the cafeteria, or also providing fund requests for a lot of clubs at our school who want money to do the things that they want to do. And another issue that was brought up was the lack of locks in the boys' bathroom in the H building. And I checked it out myself, and actually a lot of the stall doors actually don't have physical locks on them, and they just swing open all the time. And so the student council is currently discussing this problem with the custodial staff, and we just wanted to bring the board, we just wanted to bring awareness about this issue to the board as well. Yeah.
And another idea for the schoolworks subcommittee was for erg machines for the members of crew in the Cascadillo Book Club. And so the student council is working on presenting this idea to the athletics director and getting fundraisers to raise money, because the ergs are generally pretty expensive, around $600 to $900.
Going off of what Leo said about how one of student council's responsibilities is to ask for club funding, recently the debate club has requested that they need $80 for their next debate competition, and something that's new this year in student council is instead of just voting on the issue within student council, the student representatives have taken the fund request to the classrooms and have presented it in order to make sure that basically everybody gets a vote on these matters which pertain to most of the school.
Moving on to this fun stuff. Last Friday there was senior night. We had football games. Blind Spot came for the concert before the game, and it was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, Ithaca lost to Binghamton, but still it was fun, so worth it. Last Thursday there was open house. Link Crew came and gave a lot of help. There was club fairs and also New Visions from Cornell also came, so they gave a lot of information to people who were interested.
For upcoming events, tomorrow there's the Collage concert, which is a combination of the band, choir, and orchestra, in 7:30 in Polk. And also the blood drive is an event that's going to take place soon for the Key Club.
That's all from IHS.
Great, thanks, guys. And LECS?
Right, so we're kind of in the middle of our cycle right now, so no big like class changes. But we just had our annual school picnic that is a great way for our new 6th graders to get to know the rest of our students at ACS. There's a school dance this Friday, Halloween themed, so that's gonna be fun. That's about it. Not a lot going on right now.
Just school. Okay. Thanks, Ithaca High, LACS board responses. Responding to.
I can start with the question on Montessori.
Right.
You'll see right on the application that your principal signed that it says it has to be annual. And that's the New York State Public
High School Athletic Association
rule. So unfortunately, we can't decide to do it for 5 years or 10 years or something. It's an annual, and we are jointly applying with you to the section to allow for a merger of the two schools. That's
For each sport?
for each sport, yeah.
For every sport,
Yeah,
so
every
not
sport,
for a
every grade.
season or?
Yeah, afraid so, sorry, but that's how that works. Now, it's back on the agenda tonight because 2 weeks ago, we couldn't answer the question of how many students this involved. And so we asked to table it until tonight, that's why. And so I'm hoping we'll have the answer to that tonight and we'll move ahead. But that was why it got pushed back 2 weeks on that.
And this may not help folks, but districts had the opportunity to decide whether they want to participate in these kinds of mergers or not. All right, and some of our neighbors have chosen not to. We have chosen to do so, and so that was the first decision we had to make. Then as a district, we were also thinking, or as a board, we were having conversations about what does that then mean for our athletes who are currently participating. So yes, we were asking questions like, is it a non-cut sport? How many people are participating? Does it take a particular spot away from someone who's currently an ICSD student? So those are questions that we oftentimes ask in addition, depending on what's taking place. But every single sport, every single season, every year, both boys and girls, so it's not even like it's hockey, it's girls hockey, boys hockey, that we have to vote on for every single merger that takes place.
And rarely do we turn it down. I mean, typically it's a small amount coming into modified programs, and it's, well, how many soccer teams do we have? Do we have 2? Is there enough? And we get feedback from the athletic director. This board has never been one to try to shut down opportunities for kids. Obviously, we want robust opportunities for the kids in the community. So that's, but we have to go through the process. STAC is, as you can imagine, this could be an issue at the higher levels, with STAC and basketball teams or teams and athletes being recruited to go another school, and well, we want to do a merger, and it's really just to bring this one athlete and right. So, and you're hurting another program, but so it's controlled and watched that way. But typically, it's just a process we have to go through. Any other responses on anything? You good?
Just because I feel like some sort of response.
Right.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I don't know if there is an appropriate forum. I can tell you that this, unfortunately, is not the forum for us to engage in this conversation, so I don't know what that looks like moving forward. I do know that in terms of what I heard, of course, it's heart-wrenching for everyone. People serve here to make sure that we find ways to educate students. I also know that there are legalities and things that are within our control and also beyond our control. So some of that we may have some control over. Part of it is New York State law, which requires a good deal of things, including New York State audits. And so I would imagine that the board officers would probably, with our board colleagues, would have a conversation and find some sort of way to offer a response. I don't know what that response would be. It may be thank you for sharing, but it needs to have some sort of response. And so that's what I can offer in this forum here right now.
Correct. And Brad, go
I'm going to have one other, now I'm going to go back to the high school students, some questions about, there was something about debate club looking for some money and looking for some other, so I pulled up the extra classroom account for the high school for June 30th to see what was there. And I don't see debate club having any money, but I do see at the end of the year, the student council ended the year with $1,200 in the bank. And I see that whatever the activities club is, ended the year with $6,822, and last year they only spent $600 over the whole year. So it may be you have some simple access to resources right within the student body. So you may want to take a look at those.
Very good. So good. Well, thanks, Sean. Thanks, Brad. And let's move on. Consent agenda.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second?
By Pat. Any items of note? Fairly long.
Before we vote on the consent agenda, I wasn't able to attend the finance committee meeting. Can we?
Sure.
Anything? Can we just do a quick run through, maybe, if that makes?
Sure. And then the treasurer's report is there. We don't usually review that.
Yep.
It's there. We did look at the food service report. We've been encouraging them to buy some equipment. They did actually buy some equipment over the summer. So that they've been increasing that. They shouldn't have to repair everything forever. Actually making some improvements there. Number 3 is for one student who's receiving services out of state. And that's why that's on there. Special aid funds, allocating those. We've seen those before. We've seen Head Start before. Not much else there. A revised bid on salt and de-icing, a big item, because the winning bidder withdrew. So that's why it's on again 2 weeks later, if you're wondering why it's on again.
Keep voting on it.
The winning bidder had not read the bid, and the bid required delivery. And they had failed to read that part. Number 11 is payments that are called for under the IPDA contract, personnel lists, various appointments.
Yep, no, perfect.
I think that's it.
Yep. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Anything else? Move seconded. Any other questions, concerns? All in favor? That is everyone. And we have everyone, right? So everyone's here tonight, right? Pat's here. Everybody's. There you go.
I'm here.
There you go.
I'm here, my eyes are open.
Sorry. So we'll move right on and do just the real quick around the table work session reports. And Ann, go ahead and start.
Okay, well, we'll just update you. We had our Legislative Advocacy Committee today, and we discussed, and we'll discuss a little later, I guess, in this meeting, the NISBA conference and some of the things that kind of grew out of that. Also, we are going to be meeting with our state senator, Senator Elmore, in a couple of weeks, and so we're preparing for that. And thinking about what are the kinds of issues that we should be working with him, and of course, one of the main issues that we're working in that regards is to do with creating a new reserve fund. So that's kind of a primary goal of that meeting, but also we'll of course be continuing to discuss funding and the impacts as things kind of change around within the federal and state level and how that impacts us. So we also have no update yet on whatever happened with the BOCES, the exemption for the BOCES capital. We're still waiting to find out. So.
Thanks, Ann. Brad, we talked about finance facilities.
Facilities, you're going to see later in the agenda, demography study, as we begin to take another look at our facilities and where we're headed with our student count up this year. We thought it important to find out whether that's a temporary blip or if we think that's going to continue to place additional pressures on the system. And from a facility standpoint, and not only is that the student body growing, but of course we continue to want to grow our pre-K program, all of which speak to potentially classroom space, and where it is and how we use it. So we're working on that this year. Finance, we did review everything as suggested. We talked a bit about our reserves and where we are on those at this point and where we're headed in the future on reserves. There's some discussion on buses. As you know, we currently buy all of the buses out of reserves with a vote each year to use reserve money for that. There is some talk as to whether we may shift some of those to the operating budget under a lease arrangement. Stay tuned. Unlikely we would make that shift this year, but it's possible to make some shift. There may be some state aid advantages to that. And I emphasize the word may. Please don't go to the bank and start spending savings that aren't there yet. But we're at least taking a look at that. That's great.
Those number of years ago when we shifted to buying buses out of the capital reserve, we said at some point we would have to have an exit strategy. Things happen, so we have not had to do that yet. You never know what will come next, but we still need a strategy.
And still need a strategy, and as with everything now, it's tied up in the tax cap as to, if it's excluded, do we then move it to the operating budget, those kinds of questions. So we'll be studying that.
And Brad, I see we will look to adopt the 17-18 budget calendar later in the meeting.
A little later, we'll be talking about that.
Yep. Chris, HR.
So last HR meeting, Dr. James presented her recruiting efforts and really went into some detail on building relationships, looking at PLC and development, and really just where the opportunities are, where we are at, over the long range and where we've got to go. We'll probably get another updated one later on in the school year. Also, Mike Simon continues to dig into organizing the HR office. He has literally gone through everyone who touches and has contact with the hiring process, listed out the steps, and is streamlining that process. He continues to work on streamlining and digitizing all our paper applications and starting that process, which is no small undertaking. And then we will continue to start down the negotiations path, then working to tenure recommendations and review. Yeah, that's what's going on in HR.
I think you should also add that Bob Van Kuren mentioned in relation to Dr. James's effort that this past hiring season was one of the most successful that we've had in a long time in terms of increasing diversity in the district.
It was an excellent
Still have ways to go.
Right, excellent presentation from Dr. James. It was really, it was very good. Moira, since you're talking.
Since I'm talking, okay, yes. Okay, so the curriculum committee met a few weeks ago, October 3rd. Unfortunately, both Eldred and Nicole had things going on that prevented them from attending, but we went ahead with a work session. And so in a meeting that I had with Liddy Coyle and Laura Evans and Dr. Brown, we had talked again about the need for the curriculum committee to find and stick to a focus. So our focus is on inclusion and equity. And so there are a number of documents that have been around. One was the spring 2005 Strategic Action Plan to promote equity in the Ithaca School District. And then an ICSD inclusion plan, a draft of that from 2015, 2016, and then a framework for inclusion from spring of 2017. So we've got these different documents that are all speaking to these issues of inclusion and equity. So what we started last week is Laura Evans began to take those in attendance through a process of looking at these documents. So we started with the strategic action plan, I believe, to promote equity, and to look at what they had to say and what we could see that was specifically focused on curriculum that we could pull out and working toward creating a document that's a 3-year inclusion plan for the district. So our next meeting, which is next Tuesday at 4 o'clock, we're going to continue with that process.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for plowing ahead and getting work done. That's great. And Sean, go ahead.
The policy committee is doing its best to wrap up the 4,000 series. I still have hope. One of the last policies we were under consideration was whether or not Ithaca secondary schools would carry Narcan in their buildings. There would have to be a policy for that, and so we're trying to have a conversation about what made a larger community dialogue look like before the policy committee makes a recommendation to the board around that area. I'm also equally excited that the 5,000 series is around students, and we'll be trying to do a multi-pronged approach. So, for example, one of the student policies around student fundraising activities, right? Have a conversation about that. But much more importantly, around free speech seems to be an extremely big topic, and so what the district allows in terms of student expressions, things of that nature. But it'll also get us around to things of disciplinary codes and visitors to the schools and et cetera. So we'll be trying to approach that shortly, and folks will be on the lookout. There'll probably be multiple things moving at the same time over the next 4 or 5 months. So we'll be busy.
Policy's always busy.
Who are you telling?
Being busier. So
Busy being the operative word, but yeah.
We always appreciate when we can get policies through.
Got some more on tonight, so we'll see.
Exactly. So thanks everyone for that quick recap and for perhaps longer or perhaps shorter recap. Dr. Brown, it's all up to you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Andy. If I may, the first item, I'll direct your attention to the beautifully crafted invitations at your seat. I'm going to ask Ms. Ford to come up and speak to where these came from.
Well, just briefly, you got decorated by our 2nd and 3rd graders that are in our Farm to Table program. They're finishing up their first season of this program, which was, as you know, 4 weeks during the summer and then the first 10 weeks of school. And the kids have been going on field trips on Tuesdays and then coming back on Thursdays and processing them, all as a part of their case studies on different aspects of bringing items from farm to table, different aspects of that for their school. We do realize that this is a board meeting night. If you wanted to stop by at 5:30 for the first half hour of it, we're going to have great food, great harvest food. The kids are going to take part in building that menu. So I'm just passing along that invitation to you if you can even stop by. But we also just wanted you to know that that happens and this is going on. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. And this last item is Board of Education Recognition Week. And every year this time I always read this proclamation, which has a bunch of whereases, and it speaks to all the great things you do, the many, many hours of volunteer efforts, and how you service our community. But I always get to the end, and when I say it from Governor Cuomo, it sort of takes away with this group. So tonight I'm just going to take a different approach to share how much we appreciate you. We put a list of when board members started their first year elected to our board. I think this is remarkable. As I read through this list and when folks began to serve on our board, as I was talking to a colleague today who was working with this board, and a board of 9 people, they're all in their 2nd year or less. So to Steph Peacock, who's now serving on the BOCE's board as our representative, started in 2005. Jay True, who's chairing our audit committee, 2006. Rob Ainsley, 2007, and became president in 2008. Brad Granger, 2007. Elgin Harris, 2009. Sean F. Bradwell, 2009. Pat Waterloo, 2011. Chris Malcolm, 2011. Maura Lane and Ann Reichman, 2015, and Nicole LeFave in 2016. a significant amount of experience here. And I want to say thank you on behalf of my team and staff for all the many, many hours and efforts you put in to service our young people. And I will also note today our board is recognizing the On Board magazine. I don't know if you've received your most recent On Board, but 2 weeks ago, the last time we met, we were talking about going to Lake Placid. Since then, we've been to Lake Placid, and our board facilitated one of the features.
I apologize for the error they made.
I was about to make a little crack about Brad's dissertation.
They've got me writing your dissertation.
I was setting that up. Y'all see me setting that one up.
Frame that. That's great.
Sorry about that.
Oh, man. I should have brought it in here. I'm going to go get it and pass it around. Well, I'm done because that was going to be the punchline. But anyway.
Brad, just go ahead and add those things to the end of your name. Like,
You think I should?
Our board is featured in the statewide magazine that's going out to talk about your efforts at the most recent convention. So again, thank you for your efforts and congratulations on the Board of Education Week.
No, you're welcome, Dr. Brown. On behalf of the board, we thank you for that. And I should point out that, Dr. Brown, it was your presentation that the board was involved with, like Placid. I mean, you were.
Partnership like everything else. Yeah.
Just so you know how these things go, because you're not in the room. So Dr. Brown starts it out, with welcome everyone and congratulations on coming to the best presentation that you will see in the entire 3 days that you will be in Lake Placid.
No joke.
So they did have to bar the doors. There's so many people wanted to come in. It was just
that's true too.
The room was not big
away
enough.
100.
But so anyway, so it's it was just the Ithaca, Louvel, Sean, and Brad show that, and Rob stands in the back with Eldred, and I guess we're just kind of there as to guard the door. I think
Centuries.
I think that was the word. I stand in the back and just try not to make too many faces.
But everyone was involved. Moira answered questions and
Right,
was
exactly.
communicating, talking to everyone.
Oh yeah, right. And Moira giving away secrets. It's don't tell everybody what we some of the secrets of how you get answer questions on teletown halls, things like that.
Yeah.
But you can pull back the curtain a little bit, but don't pull it back too far. Right? It's anyway. I guess I'll only add. Perhaps we'll talk about Lake Placid in a bit. It's always a pleasure to go, and I was reminded once again. We have the opportunity to meet and go out and interact with a lot of different folks in the state. Just because we're Ithaca, just because people want to hear what we have to say. I did run into. A woman who I have seen all summer in the setting, and I happened to see her across the room. I was walking down the hall, and there was Jennifer in another room. That looks like Jennifer. And so I did see her when we got back, and said, Jennifer, were you in Lake Placid? And she says, well, yes, I'm actually the president of the board in Newfield. And are you on the board? I said, well, yeah, I'm at the guy. It's like, I thought she knew. But so it was for their district, it was the first time anyone has gone from their district to the New York State School Boards Association annual meeting since 2007 or 8. Because they cut out all funding for that sort of thing. Their superintendent does not attend. It was the first time she had gone. She's been on the board 4 years, first year as president, but really had not had the opportunity to interact. And she said it was just, there was so much, I went to everything I could, just trying to absorb as much as I could, because there's a lot of districts out there, a lot of boards out there, don't have the opportunity to just interact and say, how do you do what you do, and how can we take that back and improve our district? Not everyone has heard the message that 100% of the kids should have the opportunity to graduate, or that's our goal. Their boards are run in a very different way than we do here. So it was just another reminder when we do have the opportunity to go to these conferences that it is a privilege. It is an opportunity to learn, and we always take something away, and hopefully we can share what we do. But now I'll have to be more aware that I should probably go to more stuff when I have the opportunity when I'm there. And so But so it's always very good.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Brown. Anything else? E, go ahead.
So, Dr. Brown's session with Brad and Sean was excellent, and it was probably the best session of all time, but there were also some other very good sessions. And some of them remind us of how far we've come, and we are pulling for our colleagues throughout the state to reach some of the levels we've had. But Ann and I found ourselves in several this year that give me hope for what we might want to accomplish in our future. They were fantastic sessions led by individuals just shy of our superstar. Let's put it like that. There was one session from some young ladies from Long Island District proved, using statistics and evidence, that the only thing that generally moves the needle in terms of children's success is the training of teachers. Right? It sounds so simple, but until you see data behind it, it's actually quite extraordinary. It doesn't matter what program you bring in, doesn't matter what savvy a board is, doesn't matter what kind of superstar you have at the helm. It's teacher training that moves the needle, especially in reading comprehension and literacy, which we, I think, all agree is the foundation for many things. We also attended a session about the power of community schools. Community schools are schools that use wraparound services in particularly vulnerable areas where the parents of children might be receiving any number of services. The decision is to coordinate service providers and bring those services in-house. The parents get to be in the building, get the services they need delivered in one location, and hopefully bond with that school community and become a part of their children's learning experience. We also heard about the power of bilingual education. Dr. Brown always reminds me whenever I say the word coding is part of that, right? Whatever language you use, the evidence shows that if you expand the child's brain, particularly K through 3, with an additional type of language, the returns throughout the rest of their career are extraordinary. And I want to say we attended one more, but I'm blanking on what closing persistent reading gaps. And I've shared some of this information with Laura. Hopefully I can share more with you and Liddy. Sit down and actually have you explain to me what we learned, right? Sometimes it's difficult to talk to you because you're way up here, we're way down here. But the reading thing in particular was extraordinary. What they said is very clear. Let's have all of the staff trained in a consistent Tier 1 professional literacy program. Doesn't matter what program you bring in, again, doesn't matter what dog and pony show you present, the teachers have to be the one to lead that conversation. He talked about whether or not materials are matching a new demographic. It was just extraordinary. I don't know if I have not been paying attention in prior years. Probably that's partially true. But this session was eye-opening for me and hopefully for others.
And Albert, that's a great segue to our next topic. And,
Can I just add something?
and Liddy, come on up and we'll get started.
Just in terms of board members having opportunities to learn things that will help us in our mission, that there is going to be a presentation Wednesday, November 15th by the Central New York State School Boards Association at our TST BOCES, which is about exploring the mental health crisis in education. And I'm very much looking forward to attending that. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately and reading a lot about, and so I'm anxious to learn more.
That's coming up. The date, we did receive that today. So
Yeah.
that's coming up, and the date is
November 15th.
That's right, November 15th. So I said Liddy, but we don't have Liddy. But
We don't have Liddy. We have Laura,
Liddy?
the other Ellie.
so Laura, it's Dr. Laura. It's great to see you.
Well,
Mr. Harris provided the perfect segue into talking about professional development. This coming Friday is our District Professional Learning Community Day. And all the schools have developed very robust plans for how they will carry out professional learning on that day. So you have a packet of the different plans, and so what we'll do is I'll give you a quick overview of what's in the plans, and then give you a moment to peruse them, and then we can engage in responses or questions. So this year's theme is engaging all learners, and that builds on our theme from last year, which was engaging all families. And so last October, people started thinking about how to engage all families in education. And then in the springtime, Liddy ordered many anchor texts for schools. Schools chose different books, and I have a couple of examples here: Lost at School, Culturally and Linguistic Responsive Teaching, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, among many others. And so she ordered the books to help schools further their learning that was started that day. And so then in the summer came the Inclusion Conference, and people got very excited about some of the ideas shared at the Inclusion Conference. And so this Friday really is starting to bring together those three actions that took place over the past year. And so we'll be engaging all families, and you'll see as you look through the plans that there's a focus on positive relationships, because as we know, that is the basis for all good teaching and learning. So a strong focus on building positive relationships between all adults and children, and between adults and adults in our schools. And with that then is, you'll see a lot of reflection on personal experience and how our own personal experiences shape our interpretations and perceptions of interactions throughout our school buildings. With that reflection, there's also the opportunity to stop and consider what are some alternative perceptions to this situation or to this way of thinking, and how can I come up with a collaborative response or a different response based on that perception. So it's really kind of stepping outside your own lens, looking at life through another lens, or walking in someone else's shoes, and just thinking about inclusion as a whole. And as we think about inclusion, it's not just about students who have special needs, but it's about our English learners, it's about race and equity, it's about gender. So when we look at that lens of thinking about our perceptions and engaging all of our learners in developing relationships, that's what this day is about. So as you look through, you'll see a lot of relationships and trust building, connections to developing a growth mindset, and again, a different way of looking, a different lens, a lot of practicing and using strategies for positive interaction, and then connecting our work to the three levers: culturally responsive teaching, inclusion, and innovative teaching and learning. So if you have any questions or responses?
Are we missing DJMs?
Should be.
I had number 2.
They're going to breakdown of what the day looks like compared to some of the other elementary schools where you know what's happening every hour to half an hour. Is there a specific reason?
Different principals and teams at schools wrote them differently. Some of them, I think when Dr. Eschbach returned this, she said, she'd probably be working on, parsing out the time with her team as this week went on. So as you see, there are slightly different formats. Some people have worked out the times and some haven't. Many have, an opening and trust building in the morning, followed by some application of learning in the afternoon.
So these are taking place separately at each school?
At each school, that's right. Mm-hmm. So each school staff, including transportation, food service, building and grounds, etc., will be working together.
And are they working across grades, or is it like the first grade teachers or?
They're working all together, actually, okay. And so they will be working cross grades. So many of the plans have small group work where they're in, heterogeneous groups from around the school. And then some of the plans, you'll notice, include
like choice or rotation in the afternoon, so there might be 3 or 4 different topics going on, with some schools rotating through all 3 and some schools kind of starting committee kinds of work.
Gotcha. So if we have questions about individual schools, should we just email them to you?
Sure.
That'd be great. And is there a connecting theme for, or did I miss that, for?
Yeah. It's the engaging all learners. So how do we engage all learners and kind of looking at the world through a different lens? You know, how does my own interpretation of the world affect my perception of a particular situation?
And one last one. And the anchor texts are available to all schools, or is there? Can they create their own anchor text, or are there anchor texts that we've recommended for?
So
or
we
someone's
started with a
recommended for?
list, you know, that had some of these texts on them. Schools said, oh, we'd also like to add this, and this to the list. So there are about maybe 11 or 12 different books.
13 texts that basically we let the leaders of the school talk with their staff, and then they just put in an order. So we want 35 of this book and 20 of this book and 2 of this book. We really tried to make it, some schools chose one book for the whole staff, but some schools, their response to their leader was, well, some of us want this, some of us want this, and really tailored it to, the common theme there was equity, culturally responsive practices. So all the titles have that.
And if I may, I have to be very transparent here. What you have today is an evolution of our work. But I think back to 6 years ago, our district-wide PLC, we didn't even call them PLC days then, but our district-wide superintendent conference days were district-led. It was 1 or 2 people telling everyone else in the district what we would do. And being consistent with our mission and vision for thinking, we've now empowered, but we put in every building instructional leaders to organize a day. I mean, this is a bit of a risk to put folks' individual lesson plans in front of you. And I hope you recognize how much of a risk, and I'm sure they're all watching to see how you're going to respond. So we knew there would be differences, but we also hope that you would see a common theme of thinking about being purposeful about this approach to teaching and learning. So, and I'm hoping that our administrators who had to sit down and do a lesson plan are also modeling for our staff too, to be this kind of planful and thoughtful about how to differentiate. We have everyone from a bus driver to a cafeteria worker to a 25-year veteran as a teacher in the same space on the same topic. So they're having to be pushed to differentiate on this day as well, and it has to be shown in some ways in their planning. So this is a bit of a risk, and it's a beta form for us.
So I think the reason why I ask these questions is that I recognize the progression, that this would have never happened 20 years ago when my time in the district, that we wouldn't have been able to do something like this that had a connected theme in each individual building. And so I'm extremely appreciative of this. It also reminds me of a conversation we've been having at Fair College under President Collada's leadership about talking about sort of who is the leader around diversity and inclusion, and the reality is we all are. And so this offers a different level of accountability, which is partly why I appreciate and why I say that, I can follow up individually. And so I think it models for our leaders, but also holds folks to a different level of accountability about how this work gets done. So please, no mistake, I'm extremely appreciative that this is a phenomenal sign of growth to where we've been over the past, my 20 years in the district. It seems very simple and elementary, but this kind of, trusting at the building level to do this kind of PD work and have folks buy in, I get where we're at, and I appreciate it.
I just want to remind present Sean that earlier Sean might have picked up on the distinction in language. I think you said the theme is engaging all students. And what we know from this work deeply is that to do that, adults have to deal with their own pile of stuff. And it's good to see some of that is in here, especially Caroline seems to be going at it directly with white fragility. So let's hope that the adults put the appropriate lens on themselves. These are not, I keep having to remind myself and everyone, the problems that children bring to us are adult problems 90% of the time.
And I was quite pleased as I was reading through them. There are lots of plans that really do focus on how does our perception shape, or how does our own experience shape our perception of how we see student-child interactions, or child-to-child interactions, or adult-child interactions, and how can we think about it differently. through different lenses. Is there another interpretation? Also, many schools are using the protocol from the Critical Friends. We had several principals attend the Critical Friends training, and many of them have activities where people share an idea and then pass it to their neighbor who responds, and then pass it on. So there's lots of sharing of perceptions and different lenses.
What is Critical Friends?
Critical Friends is part of the, somebody else can jump in, National School Reform Network? Faculty. And it's a series of protocols. Really, they're exciting. It's been around for quite a while, and we had 6 principals?
7 principals, part of a, they do the training in 2 groups, so you do 2 weeks, and then you go back and you try some things, and then you go back and have some more reflective training. It's really around how you talk to other adults and how you help everyone have a voice, and how it sort of speaks to the larger theme that we're talking about is there's not one person running a meeting. It is how do you facilitate groups talking and reflecting and learning together. And so that's the word friends is very important. It is how can we together have a relationship where we can think critically and talk honestly to one another.
I don't see it explicitly here, but will there be a feedback opportunity for participants at the end of the day?
So many of them have included an evaluation. So that is the feedback to the particular school. I see maybe one that.
Maybe that's each one to have an evaluation piece associated with it, and whether or not I think most of them captured it in the lesson plan, but we will follow up and make sure everyone has it.
Yeah, and one of the things we always do from a district day is send out a district form saying, how did the day go? What else do you need? It's our sort of ongoing needs survey.
Yeah.
Like, how did this day meet your needs? What would you like us to continue, stop, do more of?
Yeah. Many of the plans too include anchor charts or different kinds of charting as part of the group activities, and many of the principals and teams will keep those charts and the work captured on them to continue that work in their staff meetings.
Just to follow up on the question though, how will you have the different schools communicate with each other? Because this is now all school-based, right? So they're all kind of like in separate places, which seems a really good way to like build community within your school. But then how will you have people share their experiences or keep as a district?
I think that is a great question, and that's something I've been thinking about this week as I've been looking at the plans, because they're so rich and different schools have different articles or different protocols that they're using. And I'd really like to have some time to collaborate with Liddy and others to think about what are some ways we can share these plans with each other and have the different administrators maybe talk through their plans or talk through their evaluations so they can see how each other carried out the plan. Also, a small group of principals met to brainstorm ideas about how to put the lesson plans together. So, I could see some common themes popping up, and so we generated ideas and then put that out to all principals, who kind of picked off the menu to put their plans together. But I would really like to do that, is figure out a way for the administrators to share their experience and their different plans, because they're really good.
We meet with principals monthly, so this will be on our next agenda to talk, to evaluate and reflect on.
Right. I was thinking not just principals, but the teachers.
We'll talk about how we connected. I want them to inform how we connected more so than not to tell them how we connected.
And Brad, then Nicole.
Yeah, I just want to thank Dr. Brown for sharing culturally responsive teaching in the brain with us. I did read it, and now I've seen some specific references to particular pages, so I will take the time to go back and look at those pages again. But to the rest of the board, I recommend you. It's not a long read. And we've been doing this work for years. The terminology you all understand. You can move through it.
haven't finished the other book he gave me yet, but I'm getting through actually very.
That was a postcard, Robert.
Nicole, go ahead, please.
I was gonna ask, if it's not too late, would it be possible to ask the different buildings, depending on what their activities are, to have a note taker who has like big post-its to write certain notes that they might be able to send to you that you can type to make into like some type of document? Because I think there are some conversations that are gonna be happening at different buildings that would be very helpful for other teachers as well as administrators in terms of how to even start having these conversations. So I think it would be really great for them to understand how other people are attacking it in their different environments and different buildings. So I think it'd be a great way to share perspective and strategies.
So we're sending someone that is not necessarily attached to each school to be a facilitator, a runner, a process observer. Like our teachers on special assignment are each going to a building. Zach Lynn will go to a building. I'll go to a building. Laura will go to a building. So we have built that in. We really want all the folks that are on the staff to be focusing on the learning. So we've thought of that, and we're having someone that's external but part of the district be there to be supportive, but also to be a process observer. And how did this go? How did, so they'll have the lesson plan in hand and be able to take notes on that. And then we're gonna meet with all those folks to share, like, what did they learn and what could we share out with all the administrators at our next admin meeting. So yeah, we really know that while we want communities to build, we need to learn from one another. So, yeah, we're excited about that.
Lady, that was great. Lady Spector. Oh, I know. It was
I was in Ireland, that's why.
Yeah. So, right. Thanks a lot. Thanks. Thank you. Sounds great. And we'll keep moving on. Demographic study. Discussed in facilities or finance or both, or we've been talking about this for probably 10 years.
I wouldn't know about the 10 years. I know about this
Just give me a little giving you some background, Mike. Go ahead.
Background was that there were a lot of questions, a lot of speculation, a lot of wondering what is happening in our community as far as where people are living. There seems to be a lot of building going on, and then we see a little bump in our enrollment, bumps and dips along the way, and we really don't have a great handle on that. So the board has asked me, and Amanda Verba has been a key part of this, to look into getting a demography study going for the district. And we spent most of a day asking questions of different demographers, and it felt like going to the Three Bears house. In the end, one was just way too much, and one was not enough, and we landed on what you see in your board doc, the proposal from Matthew Cropper and Dr. Jerry McKibben, and it's Cropper GIS that we're suggesting that we go with because it's a comprehensive study. Dr. McKibben seems to have all of the expertise that we would like, and we interviewed, Amanda and I interviewed him or them, and they seem to have a lot of really great ideas. The board facilities committee had some additional questions, and we had an additional conference call with him yesterday, and I believe that he answered a lot of the questions that you had.
Other clarifying comments? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I'll move acceptance of the Cropper GIS proposal.
Second.
Second by Moore. And folks have had an opportunity to look at this before, I think, along with others, but this is...
It hasn't changed.
It has not changed from the prior proposal, correct?
Right.
And we
built in a little bit more than they proposed just to make sure that we had enough robust conversation if questions came up that weren't in the original proposal.
Go ahead. So does the proposal include some of the conversations we had from the other day, right? That there could be some district-wide projections, but maybe not school-wide projections on particular categories, be it race or ethnicity or language or whatever the case may be.
Correct, but it gives us the leeway if we want to ask those questions and to have Dr. McKibben come multiple times if necessary.
So just folks that are listening from home understand this consulting group will come. They'll be in the community. They will check out how many cranes are building how many buildings, and we are the one growing economy in upstate New York. Basically, they mentioned that multiple times. So we are a little or a lot different than a lot of other communities in upstate New York. So it's hard to see what others are doing, so we need to try to determine where Ithaca is going. So are they looking 10 years out? What will this community look out?
They'll be looking 10 years out, and one of the things that solidified for me this particular company is that they guarantee a 1% variation in the data, and they'll come back in a couple of years and check to see if they're 1% off and redo the study if they're finding that it's straying more than 1%. So.
Right, if those trend lines are higher or lower than what their modeling has presented to the project that they talk about to us.
And our other time frame was reasonable as well.
6 to 8 weeks.
After completing the data collection.
Correct.
Produce the report.
Correct.
So they're saying that they expect to be done in mid to late December.
Yes, if we can get the beds data to them and they can work through their schedule. But that was much more aggressive as far as a time frame than anyone else could even come close to. So we were hoping to have this by February budget season, so we could make informed decisions about that.
For this budget and others in the future, and what we may or may want to do for a variety of aspects of the district. The impacts are multiple.
It will help us tell more of a story of the district.
Excellent. And if we do pass this tonight, that just means it's 2 weeks earlier than if we waited till next time. I think that's, so we're glad to discuss more, answer more questions. We have talked about this for quite a bit. This does seem to be the best option of those that responded to the RFP, correct? All right.
It wasn't a straight RFP, it was
reached out.
soliciting.
Right, soliciting. Thank you, Mike, for the clarification.
The lawyer over there.
I've heard that, but we'll still keep doing whatever we do, regardless of whether it's attorney or anything else? You all right, Dr. Brown? I didn't say anything bad, right?
No, I'm waiting. Sorry.
All right, all in favor? That is everyone.
Chris is yes.
Oh, sorry, everyone, and Chris has left the table. So we good?
Okay.
So onward and upward. We're back with the athletic merger with Montessori regarding boys and girls modified basketball and boys modified wrestling.
2 boys and 2 girls. And that's the number. We're talking about 2.
Well, we'll get there. How about I move the athletic merger of EAC Montessori if they go for boys and girls modified basketball and boys modified wrestling.
Second.
Second by Moore. Now we're going to ask
2 girls basketball players.
Yeah.
And 2
Yes.
boys basketball players?
How many wrestlers?
Let me pull it up one more time. I'm sorry.
There were 3 sports and we can split a child, but that's Solomon. We don't do that. Are they both the same age? There's how many modified teams? We have 7th and 8th?
So I just have the 2 girl basketball players and 2 boys basketball players.
Oh, nothing.
And wrestling was,
And this causes no cuts.
No cuts.
So when I get called by somebody whose child got cut from boys basketball,
We'll make sure.
Pat, go ahead.
I just, and I apologize for not being here 2 weeks ago to, I don't really. But I recall the last time we had a question of merging wrestling, there was parental concern because each weight class is so specific that someone in a weight class might be displaced. I don't know how modified works as opposed to varsity.
It's different.
It's different. I think everybody gets
Yeah, I think everyone gets it.
I think.
I would hope so.
No, I mean, if there's 2 in weight, as long as the other team has 2 in weight, they all wrestle.
But we're not looking at
Doesn't sound
a
like you have
wrestler
any
now.
wrestlers.
Yeah. No, we don't have anyone right now.
The request is still to merge for wrestling.
Make it an opportunity.
Because-
that it doesn't mean.
Make it an opportunity, but we don't know who.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Before we vote, I think that I would recommend that as a more of policy, maybe we talk about policy, that the board no longer consider these mergers without that information in the future, that be included. And if it's not included, then it won't be under consideration. I think that we can just make that clear for everybody.
Just put it right on there.
Right.
How many?
We always ask, and typically we have that information, but so we tabled it, and here we are again. But we don't need to spend time multiple times.
Right.
But we always like to hear from the public. Anything else? All in favor? I think that's everyone again, minus Chris.
And Nicole.
Oh, and sorry, Nicole. There's a
Dropping like flies.
there's a space over there. Sorry. So good. That is takes care of that. We are in compliance with everything, and perhaps we'll adopt the 17-18 budget calendar. And I think that's finance.
That's in your Dropbox.
Took a look at it.
Yeah. And it tells you the different topics at different meetings coming up. There's a salary and staffing analysis coming up, transportation and technology, and as we've done in the past, well before budget season, we're looking at everything. I mean, for us, budget is year-round. We'll continue to look at the different areas that impact the budget. This also has when various things need to be submitted, and also the date of the votes for it, which is May 15th this coming year. For us, there'll be a budget hearing 8 days before that on the 7th. And I note that this says we'll be doing a teletown hall that night on the 7th, so we'll do another one of those. So folks can ask questions without having to come down to Lake Street. But you can see the various topics. Please come when there's a topic that's of interest.
Certainly encourage anyone and everyone to attend. That's where we really get down into the numbers and the deep dive into the budget on each of those separate topics, as we always do. And board meetings also are listed.
Board meetings are listed.
There'll be obviously budget discussion during those board meetings.
During all of those, and we have asked, due to some of the discussion last year with TST BOCES, we've asked them to present at a finance committee meeting this year, as well as come to a board meeting. But
they're going to come twice?
Come to a committee meeting, so we're going to have more interaction.
Good. Typically better. And there's an open date that will probably be filled with us.
Oh, we'll fill that.
Yeah. We noticed that. So no, we don't have to show up. It's all good. Anything else? Are we good? Has been moved, seconded, and all that.
I'll move adoption of the calendar. I'm not sure we did.
Yeah,
No, we haven't.
I don't think we did.
Second?
Second by Pat. We've discussed it a bit, and any other questions? None? All in favor? That is all of us except for Chris and Nicole. Now, Sean, we're on to a second reading.
Folks may recall this policy from 2 weeks ago. This is a policy that changed the language for both the terms and conditions for managerial employees as well as confidential employees. So what you see in your thing, that first reading is incorrect. Both of these policies, 9820.2 and 9820 would be a first, second reading and adoption this evening, and that paragraph should be bolded. It's item number 8 and 9, if I'm not mistaken. Right, stay there. Yep, item numbers 8 and 9 on both policies are the bold. That's the language that we've changed to match our health plans with some of our other unions. Yeah.
Got it.
Oh, I move policy 9820.2 and 980 for a second reading and adoption this evening.
Second by Brad, and I was just trying to remember whether it had been moved in second. I needed a prompt from somebody. And Sean, you did that. That's great. That's.
I got your back.
No, I always get that look from Brad. It's like, would you guys get it?
Get it together. Right?
Get it. Excellent. So changes noted, and we're ready to go. Second reading. All in favor? That's everyone. Thank you. John, what do you know? So just wrapping up, the NYSBA meeting overview and election results, and I think we're just gonna, you stay for the budget and, well, the
vote?
What was the?
Voting meeting.
Voting, well, it's the voting meeting, right,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah, I think we pretty much talked about the rest of the NYSBA already.
Exactly, we talked about
But this is the program, and there, you can also get, if you weren't able to go to a session and you're interested, a lot of them have PowerPoints, and you get the links. You have access to that, right? So if you're interested.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So there really were a lot of good ones, and I also really enjoyed the one on community schools. I thought that was actually very, very interesting as an idea. So I did attend as the voting member for the annual business meeting. There were about 220 school districts there, and they that were represented, which just barely made their quorum of 200. So, but there were enough to vote. Most things were not all that controversial, so they actually moved through very quickly. The one that received the most discussion and required votes, but kind of most things they were able to vote just by, hold up your pad and let people vote. But this one failed last year, and it succeeded this year. And what it is, I'll just read it. It says, resolved that Articles 6 and 8, it had to do with the bylaws of the organization itself. Of the New York State School Boards Association shall be amended to expand the membership on the Board of Directors to include a director from the New York State Caucus of Black School Board members. It passed this time, 77% of the people that were there voted in favor of it. Last year, it failed by what?
It failed by, it was close, it was a close vote.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was interesting last year because many people spoke in favor, but then it did not.
Yeah. I mean, because there are some structural issues, because generally speaking, it's geographically determined, and this changed it in a structural way, but people there felt it was important, and so this year it passed. So most of the other things, people who went through passed without much, some of them without all that much discussion. And some of the things had to do, for which, it's like what these things are doing is asking what our New York State School Board Association is going to advocate for. So even if you pass this, it doesn't mean actually anything's going to happen. It just means that they're going to put their muscle behind saying these are the things that you stand for. And one of the things that interests me about this as a school board member is where do we kind of insert ourselves into this political process? And so there were a lot of things that were just out there that to some degree reiterated policies that are kind of pre-existing, right? So in some ways they were endorsing things that already exist. But if there was something that our district was really interested in, this would be a good forum to put it out there because it goes through their own process and the board of directors decides, which ones they are going to support, and then all the ones that they didn't support kind of end up at the end, but they get discussed as well. So, a lot of them had to do with kind of election processes that didn't necessarily affect our district, one of the more interesting ones had to do whether or not school boards should be able to sit on boards like IDAs to have some say in determining pilots. That one passed as something that school boards would like to have happen. Of course, it doesn't mean it will happen, but it means that's something that NISBA would work on and have as a position. Yeah. So anyway, that's the summary from here.
And it was a wonderful business meeting, I'm sure. How long does it take? I mean,
It was done by a little after 11.
And it started?
8? Yeah. But there was a long speech and, couple speeches.
Speechifying, that's great. But it is a 3 hours on Saturday morning, and we appreciate you slugging it out.
It's interesting. It was very interesting.
Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, Ann, about Resolution 18. I'm seeing several things about the property tax cap, no negative property growth.
Yes.
But the New York State School Boards Association supports legislation that would set the allowable growth factor of the real property tax cap at a minimum of 2%.
Yeah.
Does that mean that school districts would be required to raise their taxes?
No.
Or what? That the budget
Then it would become
grow?
less restrictive.
At least 2%.
Yeah.
As opposed to at most 2%.
You can have a negative property
Right now you can have
tax levy.
Right,
You can have a
but
tax levy limit of negative.
It doesn't mean you have to raise taxes 2%. It's saying that a cap would be at a minimum of 2. You can choose to be
Right.
1.
Whereas like was it last year that inflation was so low?
Right. The cap itself was well below 2 for everybody.
Right.
This is asking to have the cap never go below 2.
A minimum of 2.
Yeah, it addresses that the thing, like I think everybody talks about the 2% tax cap. Oh yeah, 2%. It's not 2%.
Right, and we see that every year.
It's a tax levy limit, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, people are really going to be unhappy if we have any kind of inflation and the tax cap is suddenly 3.8% in districts and villages. They're all going to be, the voters are all going to wonder what happened to the 2% tax cap.
Right.
Well, they're calling for the repeal of the tax cap also.
That won't happen.
Not until Andrew Cuomo becomes president. Or we have a
I
different
think just one
governor.
other thing to report out, because a lot of you guys all listened to it also, but the Commissioner of Education also did speak, not at the business meeting, but she did speak
To the convention.
To the convention,
Right.
and what I think she was trying to communicate through that, she talked a lot about testing and the changes that they've made to the testing, that they've changed, and rather than 3 days for the math and 3 days for the English, for the ELA, it's now 2 days of each. So I think she wanted to communicate to people who have been upset by these tests that they're really making a good faith effort to work on listening to teachers and rethinking the questions and making it less onerous actually for the students.
Addressing the opt-out rate, and of course we certainly heard from some districts that spoke and asked questions that 2 days of any tests are outrageous.
Right.
Why do we have to do this? And it's time to stop this and let the assessments revert back to the district and typically Long Island. But there's a lot of
Very, very high.
There's a lot of they are not happy.
There was a variation of opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But they had an opportunity to stand up and ask the Commissioner of Education questions. That was the forum to do so. But I got a little antsy after a while. You get one question, you don't get 5. The same guy kept asking the same question. She kept not giving.
You needed to give him the hook.
We had things to do. But it's always very interesting. Anything else, Ann?
Yep.
Outstanding job. Appreciate all that, everything that you went to and staying around for the business meeting. That's great. Because it's important that we are represented there. Anything else? Any other discussion items from the board? Anyone? I looked at Eldridge, he's got nothing, so we'll keep going. So upcoming dates of importance, I have things highlighted here. There's a joint human resources work session and a joint BO finance work session.
Yeah.
And that's in November 20th.
November 20th.
And you all are joining together to,
You're talking about salaries.
okay, just so folks know. All right.
That is one meeting that is likely to move to executive session pretty early.
Okay. And that is a Monday, just to highlight, that's a Monday, not a Tuesday, right? Okay.
Oh, that's good to know.
See, somebody highlighted it for me,
Yeah.
so that's why oh, Jennifer, thank you, Jennifer, for highlighting that for me. Otherwise, how would I be able to make it through? Another meeting at 8:34. Anything else for the good of the group? You see there are work sessions and meetings coming up really through December? Is that what that says, Jennifer?
I included that because this is where you have the shift where the board meetings are going to be on the 1st and 3rd, and the committees are on the 2nd and 4th in order to accommodate the winter recess, so it's important to go that far out.
And Thanksgiving, what are we doing? Are we meeting that?
The 21st, yeah.
We're meeting that week, correct? We're not shifting in November. We have in the past, but not this, we're not going to
Unless
shift.
you make a motion to do
Right.
so.
So we're good. So we, right now, regular sessions through November and December, we're shifting a bit.
Cornell men's hockey game that night on the 21st.
Brad, I mean, tell me how many games Cornell hockey plays. I mean, it's, as long as it's not Harvard or BU or something. So good. Anything else for the good of the group? Anything? Nothing? We're all good? Everyone has things to do and places to be. I'm not seeing any objections, so we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I did change it in the calendar, but if it's not showing up, let me know and I'll fix it.